Hey guys, I wanted to do a quick how-to guide on setting up the BKB Voyager V2 remote and receiver. I don't have a ton of time, so I'm just going to do this quick off the cuff. I definitely could miss some things, but I know some of you are really antsy about getting it set up, and I'd love for some people to test out my new firmware for it. So I'll see what I can do here. So here's the receiver. You can see there's 3 ports on it. With that port on the bottom. The one on the right is for either UART or PPM. The one on the left is for CAN, and today we're going to use both of those. And then there's also a third port in the middle here. That's another CAN port that essentially, if your CAN port is already occupied on your controller, what you can do is whatever you have plugged into that CAN port, you can actually plug into here. And that acts as a daisy chain. Basically, any CAN device that's plugged into here will then pass along with the receiver to your controller, so you can have multiple CAN devices at once. So we definitely want to get this CAN line wired up. You can see the pinout on the bottom. Sorry for the terrible focus. My cameras are all busted on my phone. But you can see the pinout on the bottom, so make sure that matches with your controller. The CAN port is required for updating the firmware on this thing. So unfortunately, if you have something like a GTV, XRV kit, something like that, that doesn't have a CAN port, you're not going to be able to update this thing to the firmware that you need unless you like borrow some other controller that does have one just for updating it. Once it's updated, I believe the CAN isn't needed. But if you have a CAN port, I definitely recommend keeping it hooked up just for future updates and things like that. So make sure your CAN is plugged in, and then make sure you also have UART plugged in, or if you're using it for PPM. Also, I'll point out on the bottom, again, it's hard to see, but it has the pinout for UART, and it has 5-volt ground, and then in the middle, TX and RX, TX on the left. If you're doing PPM, you'll use 5-volt ground, and then this TX pin you're going to use as your servo port. So if you're doing PPM, you just wire the TX up to the servo port on your controller. And then I think the only other thing to note is both the UART port and CAN both use 5-volt and ground. And in my testing, you only need 5-volt and ground wired up to one of these. So technically you could fully wire up the CAN, and then on the UART you could only have TX and RX wired up and it should still work. I bring that up just in case it's like easier wiring. I know on the old Thor 300 and 400s, UART and CAN is shared on one port, so they only have one set of 5-volt and ground. So if that makes it easier, feel free to try that. For here, I just have it wireable just to be safe. And then yeah, I have it wired up to my controller for UART and CAN. Wiring's going to be different controller to controller. I'm not like, that'd be a deep dive if we went into all the different ways you can wire it. Some people are going to have to solder their own solder or splice. Sorry, not solder. You're gonna have to splice on or crimp new connectors, whatever you need to do to wire it up to your controller. That's not what this video is about. I think that about goes over the wiring as much as I want to get into now, so let's move on to the software. Oh, last quick note, on UART, so it has RX and TX. You actually want to make sure the RX line on here goes to the TX on your controller and vice versa. Essentially what is what this receiver is transmitting, which is TX, you want the controller to receive, which is RX, and vice versa. What the controller transmits, you want the receiver to receive. So TX goes to RX and RX goes to TX. All right, next up is software. So we want to come to my releases page on GitHub. I'm going to link that in the description or comments or wherever you're watching this. And we want to come to this latest release. All the older ones are on here. Don't worry about that. Just make sure you're on the latest release and download the source code zip here. So that'll download. We're going to come to our downloads and unzip that, just to make sure we got it. All right, and now we're gonna open VESC tool on desktop. So make sure you have desktop VESC tool. You can get it from the VESC project website. How you download it is a little kind of wacky, but I'm not gonna get into that right now. You can get it for free on the VESC project website. You just gotta make an account for it. So now we're going to take our remote, and I'd also make sure your controller is off. Don't turn it on, just to be safe so your receiver isn't doing anything weird. So come over, turn your remote on. Your remote's just gonna say BKB, it's not gonna have this float logo yet. And hold down the settings button on the right. That'll bring you into settings. And then you wanna connect it with a USB-C to your computer. So I would recommend using the included USB-C cable just to make sure it's set up for data transfer. Some USB-C cables only power, so make sure you're using a good one. I just use the included one. So plug that into your remote, into the computer. And then if you come to the welcome page on VESC Tool, you'll see it pop up here. You can, I don't know why it shows up as 2, but you can connect to any of them. So go ahead and hit connect. And then on the left here, you want to come to Lisp BM scripting. Tap this folder icon right here and find that folder we just downloaded. You're going to come to display and main Voyager.lisp. We're going to open that. So that'll pop up here. And then all you got to do is hit upload. Give that a bit. You'll see it say parsing. And then if you watch your remote, it should reboot on its own. It should now show the float logo along with BKB. And your remote's updated. So now I'll show you how to update your receiver. Also, for this next step, I'd recommend unplugging your remote and turning it off by holding the power button until it turns off, again, just to be safe. All right, next we're gonna connect our controller to desktop VESC tool. One way to do this is just using USB-C to connect your controller directly to your computer. If you don't have access to that, the next easiest way is actually using mobile VESC tool like I have here as a bridge. So what you can do is turn on your controller and it should pop up here. We're gonna connect to it. And make sure your phone and your computer are on the same Wi-Fi. Come down and tap Activate Bridge. And you'll see 2 IPs here. We're going to use that top one. And we're going to move over to Desktop VESC Tool. All right, now on Desktop VESC Tool, again in this Welcome tab, it should pop up here. If it doesn't pop up here, or if you hit Connect and it's not doing anything, alternatively, you can come to this Connection tab, type in that IP address that we saw to here, and just hit Connect right here. We're just going to connect like this. And then wait for CAN devices to pop up here. If it doesn't for a bit, you can go ahead and hit Scan CAN just to make sure it does. And you should see at least 2 things. You should see your controller, and then you should see another CAN device that says Voyager receiver. So you want to go ahead and click that. If you're not seeing that, make sure your CAN line is connected correctly on your receiver going to your controller. So we're going to go to that, make sure it's selected. Now we're going to come again to Lisp BM scripting. And now we're going to load. We're going to get out of that display folder and go to receiver remote. Go to receiver side.lisp and open that. Make sure that's what's open. And once it's open, we're going to go ahead and hit upload. All right, now it should say parsing again. Wait for that to load up. It takes a bit for the receiver to fully boot. Sweet. And we can see it's trying to pair right now. It pairs anytime it's first turned on with nothing else connected. So receiver is working. All right, with them now both updated, we can go ahead and turn them both on. And out of the box, the remote should be paired to the receiver already. If that's the case, you'll see that green mark. Sorry, it's terrible focus. You'll see the green little connection sign in the right of the screen. If it isn't for some reason, what you're going to do is hold down settings. We're going to scroll down to pair. Oh my gosh, sorry. And enter that. And then we're going to reboot our controller. And that's going to put the receiver into pairing mode. It takes a bit for the receiver to start up. And then they should be paired. So now we can see we're connected. On very rare occasions, sometimes you'll try to connect and it'll say board paired, but then you come back here and it's not actually connected. If that happens, just go ahead and try it again. It's just an infrequent bug currently. And then in very rare cases, sometimes when you go to pair, at the time of pairing, the remote will freeze. If that happens, there's two things you can do. You want to plug the remote back into desktop VESC tool, and you can either upload the main Voyager script again. If you do, make sure you're uploading the Voyager one, the display one, not the receiver one. Or the easier thing to do is just to come over and hit run right here, and that's going to run the script that's already installed onto the remote. So if it crashes, if it freezes for any reason, you're not able to shut it off or anything, just make sure you connect your remote, connect through here, through the welcome tab, and go ahead and rerun that script again. Now that it's connected, it should be fairly good to go, but I still recommend doing a few things, especially if you're doing anything different like PPM or anything like that. So we're going to come to settings, and first thing I would do is calibrate for your specific remote. Right now the default values are just for typical values I saw across a couple different remotes, but I recommend calibrating for your specific one. So we're going to make sure the joystick is centered. Don't be holding it in any way when you enter this screen. Sorry. We're going to hit enter, and then we're going to fully pull back on the joystick and then fully push forward, and that's just going to calibrate the center, the minimum value, and the maximum value of your throttle. So once that's good, go ahead and hold save, and that saves that. Next thing, if you are using UART, this is already good to go. UART mode is enabled by default. If you are using PPM rather than UART, you're going to enter into here, enable PPM mode, and then save that. So make sure that's just set up however it needs to be for you. By default, so there's a safety switch you can do, in which case, if you tap the power button, you'll see that text turn green. The speed text will turn green. What this does is it actually locks out your throttle, so you can't do anything. So if for some reason you want to keep the remote on, put it in your pocket or something, but keep it on for some reason, or you just want to make sure if you drop it to your side that it's not hitting your leg, anything like that, you can just tap the power button and that turns on and off the safety switch. For some reason, if you don't want that to have that functionality, you can come into safety and disable that, but that's just on by default. For battery saver is on by default. This is something that essentially anytime you're not using the throttle or you're very slowly moving it, it's going to pull at a much lower rate. This saves significant battery. But if you want as rapid of a response as possible, technically you can disable this. Realistically, I have it optimized pretty well when enabled, so it shouldn't affect performance in any real noticeable way. So I really recommend keeping this enabled, but if for some reason you're experiencing any kind of latency or anything like that with the throttle, it can be worth disabling that and just seeing if that helps your case, but it will kill the battery a lot faster. So in general, I recommend keeping that enabled. Lastly, for remote settings, in this board menu, by default, it's set up with 30 motor poles, wheel diameter of 280 millimeters, so like a stock XR GT tire, or standard XR GT tire, an 18S battery, and then, yeah, so if you have a different setup than that for any reason, like, let's say, big tire, you can set this to 300 mil, and if you have a 32S battery, something like that, you can set that up. That's basically for the speed and trip distance calculations. And then the battery is used for the battery meter and just showing how charged your board is. So you can hold save to save that. And lastly, by default, you'll see this red H here. So this is your quote-unquote throttle mode. By default, this is set to H, which is high. And on an E-skate, this would be limiting your forward throttle, so that if you had it, let's say, on low, max full throttle would only be actually like 30% throttle, just to make it a mellower ride. In our case, we can use this to limit how much it's going to tilt nose down versus nose up. There's some people that prefer their nose down to be a lot less, because typically you need to tilt down the nose much less than you would tilt up. So if you want to limit that sort of asymmetrically, so that nose down is, let's say, 3 degrees while nose up is 10, you can change that mode by holding down on the joystick. Make sure you're not riding while you're doing this, but hold downwards on the joystick and then tap the power button, and you'll cycle through these modes. So again, by default, this is on H, which just makes it symmetric, nose down to nose up, but you can change that if you want. Medium is like 60% nose down versus 100% nose up. And yeah, I prefer symmetric personally, but you can set that however you want. There's also this 1 at the top center here, that if you hold down and tap settings, this will change it between 1 and 2. This is currently something that's unused. I'm just showing it for the sake of explaining why it's there. This is something that is communicated over UART that we could potentially use in other features moving forward. Currently it's unused, but we could in the future, and same with pressing in the joystick. We also have access to that for other new features, so hopefully we make those over time, but currently those do nothing. Alright, lastly, final setup on the controller. So first we're going to assume UART, because it's the easiest way to do it and the way I recommend doing it. But at the end we'll briefly touch on PPM for anyone that's setting it up that way. So if you're setting it up with UART, come to App Config, General, and make sure your app to use is set to UART. It might also work with no app, I'm not sure. Let's see. No, it does not. So we do need to make sure app config is set to UART. Now we're going to come to refloat config, go to the remote tab, and remote type is none by default. We want to make sure that this is also set to UART and hit right. And now if we come to app UI and remote input, if we move our joystick up and down while we're connected, make sure it says connected on your remote, we should see that input. So if you're not seeing that input, the first thing I would do is just turn your controller off and on, then wait again until your remote says it's connected to the receiver, and then check. Sometimes it just takes a reboot after you change your app to use. Second, if you're still not seeing anything, check the voltage on your remote for the board. Make sure that's matching your actual board voltage. So I can see both of mine say 73.8 volts. Just make sure that's true. If for some reason yours is saying 0 volts or some other value, I would make sure your UART is wired correctly. You might have accidentally swapped RX and TX on one end. So just make sure that's all set up correctly. All right, lastly, PPM. I don't have time to wire it for PPM right now, so I'm just going to do my best to explain and demonstrate. For PPM, we're going to come to app config, general, and change the app to use to PPM. This is just temporary to set up something. So we're going to hit right. I believe in the past I've had to actually reboot my controller, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my controller off and back on. And we're just setting this to PPM so we can configure it. And we want to wait till our remote says connected again, because again, it takes the receiver a little bit to boot back on. Once that's connected, tap this ... in the bottom right, come to PPM mapping. And again, I can't demonstrate right now, but move your throttle forward and back and make sure this blue line is going back and forth and responding with your throttle. If it's not, make sure it's wired correctly, make sure your remote is set to PPM mode, everything like that. Just make sure everything's all set up right. So if it is working, all you're going to do is, again, go max throttle, go minimum throttle, and then center your joystick. And that should change all these values, and just make sure that all looks good. Once that's set up correctly, you're going to go ahead and hit apply and write. And now you are going to change your app to use back to UART or no app. Either one works fine, I believe. But I usually just set it to UART. Go ahead and hit write. To be safe, I would again turn your controller back off and on. I don't remember if this is necessary, but again, I can't wire it up right now, so I can't confirm. So just to be safe, avoid any weird quirks or issues, I'd go ahead and turn that off and back on. And now you're going to come to reflow config, go to the remote tab, go to PPM, and I apologize. Again, I don't remember exactly, but I feel like this again was the thing. Once you set PPM, sometimes it doesn't work correctly right away. So after setting PPM, I would again turn your controller back off and on. If you want to do it just all at once, because I was just now remembering this. Yeah, set your app to use to UART, come over to reflow config, set this to PPM, and then you can just one and done, turn it off and on. But either way, once everything's set up, you reboot your controller. Again, make sure your remote says it's connected. Make sure it says it's connected. And then come to App UI, Data, and again, look at your remote input. Use the throttle forward and backwards and make sure that's changing. If it's changing, it's all good to go. If it's still not working, something's not right. So yeah, just make sure everything's all set up correctly. I'm sure some people are going to have issues. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to help individually troubleshoot every single person, but hopefully this was helpful enough. Hopefully most people are able to get set up fairly issue-free. Still, if you have questions, feel free to leave them down below wherever this is, and I'll do my best to get back to people. And yeah, the only other thing is this firmware is newer. It's fairly tested by now, but it hasn't been mass tested by a lot of people, just lots of extensive testing by me. More so UART than PPM. So if you guys experience any issues at all, please let me know. We're gonna iron out quirks over time, and hopefully it just gets better and better over time. So hopefully that works well for you guys. Thanks.